we look often to ourselves, we look often to others, and we look often to our circumstances instead of looking to the only true, perfect, living source of hope, of salvation, of provision and protection, of belonging, of joy, of all that goodness. We look for the living among the dead, and then we're surprised when we're not getting living results. In this regard, I like to think that our heart has been transformed, but there are still these weeds in there of false beliefs, of sin, of our flesh, that sinful nature that we can be pruning. The Lord does prune those he loves, and that we can be removing and pulling out those weeds. So it's not that it is a sign that your whole heart is bad, because in Christ you have been transformed. But it is a sign of a place where we have a weed. It's a sign of a place where we are relying on the unreliable for the tangible earthly things instead of relying on the source, the true living water. So if we think about it in that regard, our soul through faith in Christ is 100% saved in that heavenly sense. But in our earthly day-to-day lives, we have a tendency to look for the living among the dead, to look to ourselves, to others, to circumstances, to meet our immediate earthly needs. And that's where we get hung up, because we're not remembering and looking at that heavenly perspective, at that salvation, at that perfect source of living hope, that perfect source of the bread of life. And instead we are looking at other things, and we're getting stuck in our earthly perspectives. But as we think about idols, idols are ultimately anything that we are placing above God. And I think so often idols are good things that we twist in our sinful nature, in our weakness, in, again, not relying on God, the only true reliable thing, but we twist it, and then we are trying to rely on that good thing. But that good thing without God is unreliable. I always talk about the 3 Ds that I believe the enemy uses to keep us stuck. The first one I always think about is distraction. And I think the enemy loves to distract us away from the Lord's purpose. I believe the enemy also uses discouragement and tricks us into believing that we are not worthy. And that, I believe, is rooted in shame. We are looking for that enoughness and that worth in a place that isn't Christ. Because if we look to Christ, we would see that we are worthy in him. And the last D, so we had distraction, discouragement, is doubt. And I think the enemy uses doubt to keep us afraid. We rely on the unreliable. We look for the living among the dead. And that's when we get distracted and frustrated. We get discouraged and full of shame. And then we doubt the Lord, and we're full of fear. And those are the times when we stay stuck in our lives rather than growing in the Lord, because we know that we only bear fruit when we are abiding in, remaining in, connected to the vine of Christ.